How we doing, everybody? This is Let's Be Real Brad. Today we are doing another James Bond Tuesday review, with being the 12th film in the Eon series, For Your Eyes Only. Before we get into the review, consider liking and sharing the video and subscribing so that way I can see you all in the next video. For Your Eyes Only is the 12th film in the official Eon series that is a significant step toward the last movie, Moonraker. This film went back to its classical roots after jumping on Star Wars' success. Add in a new director of John Glenn, who will stay on the team through the 80s. This film is a massive breath of fresh air that feels like we are back to what I enjoyed about the Bond films. Great action, interesting story, incredible stunts, and cool spy mission gadgets that help the story. All these elements improve the film to make it a very underrated movie. Let's get on to the positives, starting with the cast of Roger Moore back as James Bond. So far, this is my second favorite performance of his under The Spy Who Loved Me, in which Moore seems to be extremely comfortable with the character at this point, and seems to give more effort this time around because the film feels more like a classical Bond story from the original Ian Fleming novel. Writing is solid in this one, feeling less campy and more of a hard-nosed, grittier Bond film that we had used to seeing before, that would focus more on story and characters, which I think the movie did very well. It also had a couple of twists that I didn't expect that I think worked very nicely and set up the villains in a mysterious but creative way that feels fresh than the past few Bond films already, showing us who the villain is. The music by Bill Conti is a standout, whom you may know from making the music for Rocky, in which he creates this 80s Bond score that I think grew on me as the film went along, that was much different than we have listened initially to in earlier Bond films, but it felt fresh and something different after replacing longtime legendary composer John Barry. The title song, For Your Eyes Only by Sheena Easton, that I enjoyed as a solid Bond song, even though the opening title screen I thought was very bland and disappointing when all Bond's openings are plentiful. Action sequences are quite impressive, with many of the stunts still look fantastic to this day because of the excessive amounts of well-shot practical effects that make this film age much better than previous Bond films. All the action felt less silly and grittier like previous entries that still had their Roger Moore Bond moments, but it felt exciting and significant on a grand scale. The opening has a super silly and excellent action sequence that is a big screw you to Kevin McClory for owning the rights to Thunderball, as well as Blofeld and the Spectre organization, that I thought was a nice touch. John Glenn's direction, I think, is a big step up, as having worked on previous Bond films and other technical roles, he provides a fresh look to the film, helming it very nicely throughout. No wonder why he's a staple to the 80s Bond films. Pacing feels extremely fast because I felt more engaged with the story and characters we are following that had solid writing, which makes the pacing feel light and more enjoyable. Let's get on to the negatives, starting with the story. As much as this is 15 times better than the previous film's bloated story, this does feel uninteresting and all over the place. The story didn't feel too much about the crazy action sequences and quipped one-liners place, which many critics also agree with me on this criticism. This could be because this film is based on an Ian Fleming short story novel that this film combines to make their own original story, so without having that source material of a full-length novel, that could be a massive reason the story feels so meh. Second is Lynn Holly-Johnson's character, Bibby, which felt so damn annoying and utterly pointless to the story. The performance is good, which suits this awful character that feels like if I grabbed a giant eraser and I smudged it all over the scene she is in, the movie would feel much lighter and have better pacing. Film does have quite a bit of the cheesy Roger Moore Bond moments that we come to expect that I'm just not a massive fan of, but could change on rewatch knowing how these films go. This film doesn't have many of those moments you would think, but still bother me, and it's not something I would particularly want from a Bond film. Film also lacks the grand scale of production design that Ken Adam was so legendary for in previous Bond films, that when I go back back and I think of the film, none of the production design stood out to me, which is a big disappointment, but I understand they were trying to go back to the classic Bond roots, so I guess I can take that. Overall, I had a fun time watching this film that felt like a fun and exciting experience, even though this film is a cheesy Bond film. It has solid characters, writing, and directing that makes this a new entry into the series, with being my second favorite Bond film so far. I'm giving this film a 6 out of 10. So, let me know down below in the comments section if you have seen For Your Eyes Only, and if you have, what did you think of it and where does it rank in your James Bond film rankings? Next week, we will be talking about the next Roger Moore Bond film, Octopussy, so make sure to check it out before next week's review. As always, I will see you all in the next video.